Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Trolson, and I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute overview of what to expect in the complete WCF course. So the objectives of the course begin by making sure people really understand exactly why Microsoft created WCF in the first place. What problems does it try to solve? We'll be talking about a bunch of common development tools and project templates that we find in the SDK as well as Visual Studio. One of the biggest things that any WCF programmer has to contend with is all the different binding types. So here we'll be talking about what all of our binding options are, and you'll learn how to configure them using configuration files as well as code. Once we understand all the binding options, then we will begin to really talk about building a complete front-to-back application that makes use of the custom hosting infrastructure. So we'll be talking about service host a little bit. We'll also learn how to build hosts that kind of tap into core Windows services, including IIS. Now, during this discussion, you're going to be learning about a lot of other important things that get the client and the actual service communicating, such as metadata exchange, and we'll also be talking about the role of custom proxies. We'll also be talking about a lot of communication patterns that clients and hosts can get into, such as asynchronous calls and fire and forget calls. We'll be looking quite a bit at different types of contracts, including data contracts and message contracts. We'll be talking about SOAP faults, which are another type of contract. We'll also talk a bit about ways that the client can influence the lifetime of the remote object and the choices that we have for configuring remote objects. Now, one of the biggest topics, of course, for any industrial strength application is security. And security is always kind of the Pandora's box, right? You open it up and just all these questions kind of come out of that. We're going to be talking about a lot of really common things that you'll bump into, and that'll get you in a good position to go exploring your application and company specific security problems. We'll have an introduction to building a RESTful service with WCF, and we'll also be talking about a lot of changes that took place under 4.0. Basically, we have a lot of freebies nowadays. When it comes to the prereqs for the attendees, please be aware that this is going to be an intensive programming course. So we expect that you're already very comfortable with Visual Basic or C#. We expect that you're comfortable working with just basic .NET programming techniques, referencing libraries and importing namespaces. And we also assume that you're comfortable using Visual Studio to build and debug your software. The breakdown of the class is always kind of different based on the group that we're working with, but as a general rule, you can assume that about 40% of your time will be spent in lab, and somewhere around 60% of the time will be for lectures and interactive demos. Now, we do give solutions to all of our labs, so that's certainly yours to keep. Now here's a breakdown of what we get into on a chapter-by-chapter basis. Remember, Chapter 1, we're just going to be kind of setting the stage for things to come, but we also, in this chapter, will be talking about all of our binding options. Do you want to use TCP, HTTP, maybe a named pipe? We'll talk about different choices there. In Chapter 2, that's where we're going to be looking at the different types of hosts we can put together, and how we can build clients to consume our services. That's where we have to talk about some other related topics like MEX. Chapter 3 will kind of further go into the connection between host and clients by looking at a couple of common calling patterns. Now Chapter 4, that's where we talk about all the different types of contracts, whether it be a data contract or a message contract or an error contract. We'll be addressing some issues in lifetime of remote objects in Chapter 5. Talk about some common security techniques that you'll bump into, such as authentication and authorization. And then we'll also be talking about some changes that took place in .NET 4.0 and that also would include an introduction to RESTful services. When it comes to the setup for the class, it's thankfully very simple. As long as you have Visual Studio 2010, you have everything that you need to run the course. Now, as we go through the course, part of the earlier labs will have you build a simple database as well as a data access library that we're going to reuse. And we can get all of our work done using SQL Server Express, which is installed automatically with Visual Studio 2010. If you have a full copy of Microsoft SQL Server, that would be fine too. So that's just a real quick rundown on what we go through in the complete WCF class. Hope to see you there.